Welcome to a historic day for Willow Creek. A fresh scar and Crank Bar.
That's enough.
This is his property. Coming in a thick court.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one of those small-town battles that starts with a smile and ends with somebody learning a very expensive lesson. Before we begin, please take a second to subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your little berry patch is about to serve a higher purpose, Mr. Miller. Karen said it the way some people say grace over a casserole dish, with a smile already prepared for applause. The words floated out into the thick July air and hung there above the fence line, sticky and sweet and wrong. Behind her, two men in orange safety vests stood with survey poles and a rolling measuring wheel, shifting their weight in the heat like they wished they were anywhere else. Karen herself looked perfectly arranged for battle in a floral dress that did not belong anywhere near topsoil, a thick binder tucked against her chest as if it were holy scripture. She lifted one hand and pointed across the 10-acre section of my farm my grandfather had planted in blueberry bushes 70 years ago. This entire section, she said, will be graded and gravel surfaced for community overflow parking. We have the Founders Day Gala next month, and our residents cannot be expected to park on the street. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. I stood just inside my gate with the morning's irrigation check clipboard still in my hand, my boots dusty, my shirt damp at the collar. The berries were halfway into peak season. The bushes ran in straight green rows all the way toward the tree line, full and heavy, dark clusters hidden beneath leaves like little pockets of midnight. The field smelled like damp soil and summer sugar. A mockingbird was going off from the power line down by the county easement. It was an ordinary morning on Miller Family Farm until that woman stood there smiling like she was announcing a ribbon cutting for land that had belonged to my family since Harry Truman was in office. I should say this plainly. My property was not part of her subdivision. It had never been part of her subdivision. My farmhouse, barns, fields, and woodlot had been here long before the first slab was poured for what eventually became the estates at Willow Creek, a development of oversized houses with stone veneers, decorative shutters, and a homeowners association that believed a uniform paint color was close to moral virtue. The only thing my farm shared with that place was a stretch of county access road and, unfortunately, proximity to Karen. I set down the clipboard on the fence post and looked at her. "You're talking about paving a certified organic blueberry field," I said. Her smile tightened in a way that suggested she did not enjoy being corrected. "I'm talking about progress," she said, "and community infrastructure." One of the surveyors glanced at the other. Neither one said a word. I took a slow breath. 30 years in the Marine Corps teaches a man that the first response matters. You can escalate too fast and lose the room. You can also stay silent too long and let nonsense start to sound legitimate. "My property," I said, "all 60 acres of it is not under your HOA's control. Never has been. Never will be." Karen gave a short little laugh, the kind meant to make everyone else feel late to the joke. "We've reviewed the county ordinance," she said, tapping her binder. Section 4, subsection C of the Community Development Ordinance from 1998 allows for the appropriation of underutilized agricultural parcels for essential community infrastructure. This land qualifies. Underutilized. That word hit me harder than the rest of it. I was up before daylight 6 days a week and half the seventh. I knew the moisture level of that soil better than most people knew their own blood pressure. For the past 5 years, I had lived inside the kind of paperwork nightmare only a federal agency could dream up, because I wanted that field certified organic, and I wanted it done right. Every water test, every input log, every pest control measure, every compost application, every buffer requirement, every inspection, I had done it all. Not because it was easy, because my father had died before he could modernize the farm, and my wife had died before she could see me finish, and I had decided there would be one thing in my life I brought all the way across the line. That field was not underutilized. It was the most documented 10 acres in the county. I stepped closer to the fence until we were standing only a few feet apart with rusted wire between us. "You are trespassing," I said, "and those men are trespassing with you. You have 60 seconds to leave my property line before I call the sheriff." Her face shifted then, just for a heartbeat. The smile flickered, not gone, but tested. Don't be dramatic, Mr. Miller, she said. We are operating under legal authority. No, I said. You are operating under arrogance. The taller surveyor cleared his throat. Ma'am, he muttered, we can come back another time if... Karen cut him off without looking at him. The preliminary grading is Monday, she said to me, her voice flattening. You can accept compensation at county agricultural value, or you can object and deal with the consequences later. But this is happening. Then she turned and walked back toward her SUV, the surveyors hurrying after her. Gravel crunched under their boots. Her perfume lingered in the humidity after the vehicle pulled away, sharp and powdery and out of place. I stood there for a long time, staring at the gate. Monday. That was the trick, of course. Bullies love a short deadline. It creates panic, makes normal people rush toward concession just to make the awful feeling stop. But panic and I had broken up years ago. I picked up my clipboard, finished checking the irrigation line on the north row, and then went into the house to begin. My office sits off the back hall of the farmhouse, next to the mudroom and across from the laundry sink. It has knotty pine walls, 2 metal filing cabinets, an old army green desk I bought used in 1989, and 1 narrow window that faces the pecan tree. There are no military plaques in there, no shadow boxes, no framed photographs of younger men in pressed uniforms pretending time is a concept for other people. The walls hold maps, soil charts, crop rotation notes, water analysis reports, and certificates. The most important one hangs directly over the desk. United States Department of Agriculture, Organic Certification. A neat official document in a dark frame. Anybody passing through might see a piece of paper. I saw 5 years of near-constant labor and enough forms to kill a lesser man. I sat down, pulled my reading glasses on, and opened the file cabinet drawer marked Land, USDA County. The binders inside were arranged in exact order. The Marine Corps leaves you with many habits. One of the better ones is that if someone threatens something you love, you do not rely on memory when paper will do. I started with the county plat maps. My grandfather, Samuel Miller, bought the Corps parcel in 1948 with money he made hauling produce and repairing engines after the war. Back then, the road out front was narrower, the town smaller, and nobody with any sense called farmland, potential development opportunity. The property lines had held for nearly 80 years. The deeds were clean. The easement was county-controlled. The zoning designation was agricultural exclusive, not transitional, not mixed use, not pending annexation, agricultural exclusive. From there, I pulled the USDA binder. The thing was a monster. 3 inches thick, full of tabs, federal language, inspection reports, soil purity tests, annual renewals, buffer zone documentation, seed source records, water source evaluations, crop histories, field activity logs, organic system plans, and correspondence with the regional certification office. The relevant language was right where I remembered it. Certified land use must remain consistent with the approved organic system plan. Contamination events or unauthorized disturbances could trigger immediate investigation, remediation requirements, and loss of certification. Prohibited substances, land alteration, unapproved activity on the certified parcel, all of it came with consequences. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle. Karen thought she was fighting an old man with a farm. What she had actually done was threaten a federally certified agricultural operation on paper, in writing, in advance, with witnesses. That was not the same thing. My next call was to the county records office. A woman named Mary answered in a voice so dry she sounded as if she'd been filed in a cabinet herself back in 1982. County records, she said. I gave her the ordinance number Karen had cited and asked for its full history. There was a pause, then the sound of keyboard tapping. That's an unusual one, Mary said. How so? It was tied to a specific development package for Ridgeview back in the late 90s. Hold on. More tapping. Papers rustling. Then she came back on the line. Yes, sir. Ordinance 19984. C was superseded by the Unified Development Code in 2005. It's no longer enforceable. Hasn't been for years. I smiled then, though there was no one there to see it. So if somebody cited it as current law, they'd be wrong. Would you put that in writing if I requested certified copies of the replacement code and supersession records? I can have those ready by this afternoon. Mary and I got along fine after that. I spent the next 4 hours assembling a packet. My deed, the original plat map, current zoning documentation, county code references, USDA certification materials with highlighted sections on land use and contamination risk. A short statement describing Karen's visit, her threat to grade the field, and the Monday deadline. By 2:30, I was in town at the local bank, where the notary, a young woman with gold hoops and quick eyes, looked at my stack of papers and asked, "Should I be worried for you?" "No," I said. "Somebody else should be." I drafted the cease and desist letter myself. It was clear, polite, professional, and cold enough to hold meat. I informed Karen Miller, president of the estates at Willow Creek Homeowners Association, that neither she nor any agent, contractor, surveyor, board member, or representative of the HOA had any right to enter, alter, survey, grade, or otherwise interfere with my property. I cited the defunct ordinance, the current zoning, the federal certification status of the field, and the legal consequences of trespass and damage. I stated that any such action would result in immediate civil litigation, requests for injunctive relief, and notification to federal authorities concerning disruption of a certified organic operation. I signed it, had it notarized, made copies, and drove straight to Willow Creek. The entrance was exactly what I expected: decorative stone pillars, a fountain trying too hard, neatly trimmed shrubs arranged like they were waiting for inspection, mailboxes clustered in a kiosk by the sign. The sort of place where a man could get fined for leaving his trash can visible after pickup, which, as it turned out, was not theoretical. Karen's house was easy to find. It sat on a cul-de-sac and had the kind of expensive landscaping that says nobody who lives here has ever knelt in mud for a tomato plant. Her lawn looked vacuumed. 3-car garage. White SUV. Seasonal wreath on the door in July because somewhere along the line people with too much time started believing door decorations were a personality. I walked up the drive, taped the notarized letter squarely to the center of her front door, and left. The phone rang the next morning at 6:02. I was already outside with a mug of black coffee, standing at the edge of the field while the sun climbed over the tree line in strips of orange and pale gold. The berries were quiet in the morning. Dew held to the leaves. Somewhere across the back pasture, a tractor coughed to life on a neighbor's place. I looked at the number and answered. "What is the meaning of this?" Karen barked before I said a word. "Taping some ridiculous threatening letter to my home? This is harassment." "Good morning, Karen. You cannot come onto private property, and you came onto mine first." There was a sharp inhale. "I was conducting official HOA business. You were trespassing. We have authority under county." "No, you don't." I let that sit just long enough to irritate her. Then I said, "I confirmed it yesterday with county records. The ordinance you cited was superseded in 2005. It's legally dead. And if one of your contractors disturbs that field on Monday, you'll be dealing with more than county issues." The edge in her voice changed. Still hostile, but less certain. "Oh, please," she said. "Your little hobby farm certificate is not going to stop a community improvement project." Hobby farm. My grip tightened on the coffee mug. It's not a hobby farm, Karen. It is a federally certified organic operation. If your equipment contaminates or alters that certified parcel, your board, your contractors, and anyone authorizing the work may be liable for federal penalties, remediation costs, and civil damages. Silence. Not agreement, not surrender, but silence. Then, you're bluffing. I looked out across the rows my grandfather had planted by hand. "I'm a retired master gunnery sergeant," I said. "We don't bluff." Then I hung up. By noon, the HOA's law firm answered. The letter arrived by certified mail in a crisp legal envelope and smelled faintly of fresh toner when I slid it open at the kitchen table. It was written in the usual way of attorneys paid by people who confuse expense with accuracy. Lots of whereases and heretofore, and interpretive language about spirit of development goals. They rejected my claims, asserted that the HOA had authority under a broad reading of county intent, dismissed my organic certification as a private agricultural matter, and informed me they were moving forward. They also fined me $500 for unauthorized signage on HOA property, apparently referring to the letter on Karen's door. I laughed so hard I had to set the paper down. Then I stopped laughing and read it again. That fine told me more than the rest of the letter. They were not planning to win on the merits. They were planning to exhaust, annoy, and outpaper me. Death by envelope. That works on a lot of people. It does not work on men who spent decades dealing with procurement officers. What I needed now was leverage and witnesses. That afternoon, I did something I generally avoid for the preservation of my blood pressure. I logged on to the local community Facebook page. I searched HOA overreach. The results were better than I expected. There were posts about a retired teacher fined because her wind chimes were considered excessively melodic. A young couple ordered to remove a vegetable garden because it was visible above a backyard fence and violated aesthetic uniformity. Someone cited for parking a work truck in his own driveway overnight. Someone else threatened because a grandson's basketball hoop had remained near the curb 3 days too long after Easter. The pattern was obvious: petty enforcement, selective aggression, legal posturing, and Karen's name everywhere. Then I found a long post from a user named Legal Eagle 88. It was a detailed breakdown of how the HOA board had been misapplying bylaw provisions and using the association's retainer council to intimidate residents into paying fines rather than challenging them. The writing was clear, sharp, and angry in all the right places. The user's name, after a little digging, was Arthur Chen. He was a corporate attorney, early 30s, recently moved back to the county to help his parents with their grandchildren. His parents lived in Willow Creek and had been fined thousands for painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. That might sound funny until you remember liens can follow foolishness into serious territory. I sent him a short message. My name is John Miller. I own the farm adjacent to Willow Creek. Your HOA president is threatening to turn 10 acres of federally certified organic blueberries into parking for a gala. I've attached the cease and desist and their attorney response. Does any of this sound familiar? He replied in under 5 minutes. Mr. Miller, I've been waiting for someone like you. Can you meet tomorrow? We met at a diner on Route 18 that still served pie on real plates and kept the coffee hot enough to take paint off metal. Arthur was younger than I expected, thin-framed, neat dark hair, pressed shirt without a wrinkle on it, and eyes that missed nothing. He had already printed my documents and marked them up with notes in the margins. He didn't waste time. My parents bought in Willow Creek to be close to my sister, he said after the waitress poured coffee. They thought they were getting a quiet place with decent sidewalks and people who decorated for Christmas. Instead, they got Karen. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of violation letters, fine notices, rejected appeals, payment demands, and photographs, a satellite dish issue, shutters, trash cans. An RV parked for 36 hours while a resident's brother was in town recovering from surgery. Every incident was small enough to sound stupid in isolation and ugly when viewed together. She runs the board like a private kingdom, Arthur said. The law firm backs whatever she wants because they bill by the hour, and the residents are footing the bill. I told him about Monday. I told him about the defunct ordinance, the USDA binder, and the grading threat. Arthur read the federal certification page twice. Then he leaned back, and for the first time since we'd sat down, he smiled. This, he said, tapping the highlighted page, is not a shutter color dispute. No, this is excellent. I stared at him. Excellent for who? For you, he said, because she has wandered out of petty HOA nonsense and into real legal exposure. She has no jurisdiction over you. None. And if she physically disturbs certified land after written notice, we're not talking about a he said, she said neighborhood squabble anymore. We're talking about documented trespass, property damage, possible federal implications, and personal liability for board members. I stirred my coffee and watched the cream disappear. What do you need from me? Patience, he said, and nerve. He laid out the strategy like a man setting chess pieces. Right now, Karen had threats, bad citations, and a law firm willing to write nonsense on nice paper. What she did not yet have was a clear, undeniable act that could bring a court down on her fast. If we sought an injunction before she moved, she would posture, delay, muddy the facts, and try to recast the entire thing as a zoning misunderstanding. But if she touched the field, really touched it, with a contractor, after written notice, publicly, that changed everything. You want me to let them Damage my land? I said. He held my gaze. I want them to commit an act they can't explain away. I didn't like it. I liked it even less, because I knew he was right. Arthur leaned forward, lowering his voice. She thinks this is a show. She wants triumph, not compromise. Which means if you give her the slightest sign you're wavering, she'll grandstand. She'll make it public. She'll overplay her hand. People like Karen always do. We spent 2 hours at that diner building the trap. Arthur would draft the actual lawsuit and emergency injunction papers so they were ready to file the moment there was physical trespass and damage. He would quietly contact residents already fed up with Karen and start building support. I would send one more measured letter, this one framed as a good faith attempt to discuss boundaries and avoid conflict. Not a retreat, a feint. We would also need the USDA ready. That call came next. David Chen was the regional field agent assigned to my certification zone. He had conducted my last 2 inspections and was, in the way of serious bureaucrats, both deeply irritating and entirely dependable. He believed in rules the way some people believe in scripture. When I explained the situation, he went very quiet. Mr. Miller, he said finally, if they disturb certified soil, the implications could be significant. I know. Significant means years of remediation in some cases. I know that too. A pause. What exactly are you asking from me? I'm asking you to be ready. He did not like that answer, but I explained what Arthur had explained to me. A warning alone might scare them, but it would not stop the pattern. Karen would simply move on to the next person. Maybe next time it would be one of her own residents. Maybe somebody too tired or too broke to fight. I need consequences she cannot spin, I said. David exhaled slowly. I can be on standby Monday morning, he said. If you have photographic evidence of active disturbance to the certified parcel, send it immediately. I can get there as soon as possible, and I'll have the preliminary violation documents prepared. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said. Just don't let them do more damage than necessary. That weekend became a study in controlled anger. I sent the softened letter Arthur drafted. It reiterated my legal position, but offered to discuss neighborly accommodation regarding access concerns. A phrase like that is catnip to people who mistake politeness for weakness. Karen took the bait beautifully. Flyers appeared on Willow Creek bulletin boards announcing the Willow Creek Community Enhancement Project. Someone had mocked up a rendering of my blueberry field transformed into a cheerful gravel annex with tidy white stripes and decorative planters. The language on the flyer praised Karen's visionary leadership and framed the parking lot as a benefit to property values and community pride. I got a copy from Mrs. Gable, the retired teacher with the melodic wind chimes. She came by my farm in a pale visor and sensible shoes, carrying the flyer like contraband. That woman is out of her mind, she said. She says you agreed. I did not. I know you didn't. She looked over my shoulder toward the field and shook her head. My husband used to buy blueberries from your daddy. We'd bring home 2 flats and freeze half for winter cobbler. That field has been here longer than most of us have been alive. Mrs. Gable turned out to be a better ally than half the men I served with. She also agreed to sign me into the next HOA meeting as her guest. The meeting took place Thursday night in the Willow Creek Clubhouse, a beige rectangle of a building near the pool. The room inside smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Folding chairs filled up fast. Board members sat at a long table at the front with plastic water bottles and legal pads arranged as if they were preparing to govern something of consequence. Karen presided in a navy blazer with gold buttons and an expression of self-importance so concentrated it could have powered the room. I kept my head down and sat near the back with Mrs. Gable. Arthur was there too, though not beside me. He was sitting 3 rows over, blending in with residents and taking notes. Another resident, a tech guy named Mark, who had been fined for a visible satellite dish, sat near the wall with his phone angled just right to record everything. Karen ran the meeting the way bad principals run assemblies. Questions were tolerated only if the answers flattered her. Complaints were cut off. Rules were cited loosely and with maximum confidence. Then she reached the president's report. She stood, clicked a remote, and the parking lot rendering appeared on the screen behind her. Friends and neighbors, she said brightly, I'm thrilled to announce a major improvement for our upcoming Founders Day Gala and for the long-term convenience of our community. A few people clapped, because some people will clap for anything if there is a projector involved. As many of you know, parking has been an ongoing challenge for Willow Creek. Through diligent work by your board, we have secured use of the adjacent underutilized agricultural parcel to create the Willow Creek Community Parking Annex. Secured use. There it was. The lie, spoken full volume. She kept going. The owner was initially uncooperative and made some rather outlandish claims, but after review by our legal counsel, he has agreed to cooperate with this vital project. A few chuckles ran through the room. I did not move. That was the hard part, not reacting when someone lies about you in public. But Arthur had warned me. Let her build the rope herself. One man raised his hand. What's this going to cost us? Karen waved that question away like smoke. Minimal. Compensation is set by county standards. The cost is negligible compared to the increase in convenience and property value. Another lie. Then came the jewel. To celebrate this milestone, she said, smiling like a woman unveiling a civic statue, we'll hold a groundbreaking ceremony Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Coffee and donuts will be provided. I hope you'll all join us to witness this exciting next chapter for Willow Creek. She had not only announced the trespass, she had scheduled witnesses. Afterward, people clustered around her to congratulate her, while others left with faces that said they had either doubts or indigestion. I walked out with Mrs. Gable and kept my voice level. She lied to every person in that room. Mrs. Gable patted my forearm. Good, she said. Now half the neighborhood knows exactly how she lies. Arthur met me in the parking lot after most people had gone. She's cooked, he said quietly. Mark got the whole thing. The audio is clean. I still don't like letting that machine touch the field. I know, he said. Neither do I. But Monday we finish it. The weekend stretched. I walked the rows more times than I can count. I checked irrigation I didn't need to check and rechecked stakes that had held for years. The bushes were full, almost glossy in the afternoon sun. Bees worked the late clover between rows. The barn cat slept under the equipment trailer. Everything ordinary became painful because of how easily it could be damaged by somebody who saw land only as a surface. On Sunday evening, I sat on the back porch with a legal pad and thought about my grandfather. He had planted the first bushes with a tobacco knife and a borrowed tractor. My father expanded the patch, then nearly lost the farm in the bad years when prices dropped and banks got mean. I came home from active duty for the funeral and ended up staying longer than planned. Then my wife, Ellen, God rest her, convinced me that if I was going to commit to the farm, I ought to modernize it properly. She was the one who pushed the organic certification idea in the first place. People will pay for berries they can trust, she said. People will complain about anything over $4 a pint, I told her. She laughed and started a spreadsheet anyway. By the time she got sick, we were deep into the process. I finished it after she died. Some men build memorials in stone. I did it in paperwork and soil management. So no, it was never about a parking lot. Monday morning arrived hazy and pale, the sort of summer dawn that feels damp before the sun is even fully up. I was dressed by 6. Jeans, boots, clean work shirt, no hat. I wanted my face visible in every photograph and every witness account. At 8:45, Deputy Miller, no relation, rolled up in a county cruiser and parked near my driveway. He was a broad-shouldered man with a calm manner and the weary patience of somebody who had spent years refereeing neighbor disputes involving fences, dogs, and bad decisions. I walked him through the situation, showed him the property line, the county plat map, the letters, the fence. He listened without interrupting. So you're not asking me to stop anything unless there's a breach of the peace? He said. I'm asking you to witness trespass if it occurs. He nodded. Fair enough. Mrs. Gable arrived 5 minutes later in a silver sedan, and behind her came Mark and the young couple with the uprooted vegetable garden. Arthur parked down the road out of sight, ready to drive in on my call. My phone was fully charged. David Chen at USDA was on standby 2 towns over. At 8:58, the Willow Creek procession appeared. Karen led it in a giant yellow pantsuit that made her look like a warning label. Behind her came board members, residents with coffee cups, a folding table someone had set up near the roadside with donut boxes, and finally a flatbed carrying a compact orange bobcat. The contractor driving the truck looked tired enough to have already regretted taking the job. He unloaded the machine while Karen gathered residents near the fence, as if they were about to witness a community playground opening. She saw the cruiser, and me, and smiled anyway. Then she raised a handheld megaphone. "Good morning, everyone," she called, the speaker squawking at the edges. "Welcome to a historic day for Willow Creek." Historic. That woman could not help herself. She gave a short speech about progress and community vision and maximizing shared resources. She gestured at my field like a woman describing a banquet hall she had reserved. I stood with my arms folded on my side of the fence and said nothing. Then the Bobcat operator walked over. "Where do you want me to start, ma'am?" Karen pointed to the corner of the field where her surveyors had previously stuck a wooden marker with pink ribbon. "Right there," she said. "Take off the top layer and clear out a 50 by 50 section. We need the base ready for gravel." The operator climbed into the machine. Diesel coughed. The engine rose. Metal tracks clattered over the hard roadside edge. I felt the pounding in my chest before the bucket even dropped. This is what people do not understand about land. They think only ownership matters. Paper title. Tax bills. Lines on a map. But when you have worked the same ground long enough, your body recognizes violation before your mind can articulate it. You know how the soil should look, how it should smell after rain, what color it turns in heat, where the ground dips by an inch, how roots spread under cover crop. Watching that bucket lower into the field was like watching somebody press a boot into the center of a family photograph. The Bobcat crossed the line. The bucket bit. Steel scraped rich dark soil and folded it over in a long raw curl, tearing through the clover cover crop and leaving an ugly open scar across the green. I lifted my phone and recorded everything. One pass was enough. The machine backed for another. I made 2 calls. "Execute," I told Arthur. Then, "David, the violation is active. I have video. Sending now." After that, I walked toward the fence. I did not run. I did not shout. Men who shout too early lose authority. I reached the line just as Deputy Miller stepped off my driveway and began walking over too. "That's enough," I said. The operator looked up and stopped. Karen turned toward me with triumph already arranged on her face. "You cannot interfere with this project, Mr. Miller," she snapped into the megaphone, then lowered it when she saw the deputy closing in. "This is authorized work." "No, ma'am," Deputy Miller said evenly. "It isn't." Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" "This is his property," the deputy said. "You and your contractor are trespassing." She drew herself up. "We have authority under county ordinance." I said, "The one superseded in 2005? The color moved out of her face so quickly I could see it happen. Before she recovered, a black sedan pulled up hard on the shoulder and Arthur got out with a briefcase. He walked straight toward us with the kind of clean confidence lawyers get when the facts are finally on their side. "Karen Miller?" he said. She stared at him. "My name is Arthur Chen. I represent John Miller, owner of this property. You and the board of the estates at Willow Creek Homeowners Association are hereby served." He pulled a thick packet from the briefcase and handed it to her. The top page had the court stamp. "This action includes claims for trespass, property damage, fraudulent misrepresentation, and a petition for emergency injunctive relief. The injunction has been electronically filed. Any further activity on this parcel will compound liability." Karen looked from the papers to Arthur to me. "This is absurd," she said, but there was no force left in it. "This is community business." Arthur's voice stayed cool. "It was community business right up until you ordered a contractor onto private land under a defunct ordinance after written notice that you had no authority to do so." The residents had gone very quiet. Then another car came up the road. Dark green sedan, government plates. David Chen got out wearing a USDA polo and carrying a clipboard and camera bag. He didn't bother with introductions at first. He walked directly to the disturbed soil, photographed the scar from multiple angles, knelt to examine it, took soil samples, bagged them, checked the boundary markers I had already established in my certification file, and wrote notes with efficient disgust. Only then did he turn toward the crowd. "Who authorized this?" Karen was still holding the lawsuit packet. It fluttered slightly in her hands. "I'm the HOA president," she said. David gave one short nod and wrote that down. "Ma'am, I am David Chen, field agent with the United States Department of Agriculture. You have directed a contractor to disturb land within an active federally certified organic agricultural operation." One of the board members made a sound like air leaving a tire. David continued in the same measured tone. "This may constitute a violation of federal regulations governing certified organic production and land integrity. Civil penalties may apply. Liability may extend to the authorizing association, individual board members, and contractors involved. Remediation costs, recertification delays, and associated damages can be substantial." "How substantial?" somebody in the crowd asked. David looked up from his clipboard. "Potentially 6 figures, depending on the extent of contamination and remediation required." The words landed like dropped cinder blocks. Karen tried one last time. "We were told this was underutilized land under county." "The county does not supersede federal certification requirements," David said. That was the moment the mood broke. You could feel it move through the people standing there with their donuts and paper cups. The event Karen had staged as a triumph had turned into something else entirely, and everybody knew it. Neighbors who had shown up for a ceremonial photo op were now witnessing their HOA president being served in front of a sheriff's deputy and a federal field agent. The Bobcat operator shut down the engine without being asked. "Load it," Arthur said to him. The man did not argue. He climbed down, avoided everyone's eyes, and started reattaching chains with frantic speed. Karen's mouth opened twice without producing anything useful. I finally spoke. "You were told no in writing," I said. "You were told the ordinance was dead. You were told the land was federally certified. And you chose coffee and donuts anyway." That would have been enough. But then Mark, God bless him, said from the back of the crowd, "And she told the whole neighborhood you agreed." Heads turned. Karen looked around like she might still recover control through sheer force of personality. She couldn't. Deputy Miller took statements. Arthur collected names. David finished his documentation. Residents drifted away in clusters, voices low and urgent. Nobody wanted the donuts anymore. By noon, Mark had posted the audio from the HOA meeting to the neighborhood's private page. By 2 o'clock, half of Willow Creek had heard Karen claim I was cooperating. By dinner, the story had escaped the subdivision and reached the diner, the feed store, the pharmacy line, and the church luncheon circles where older women can dismantle a public reputation faster than most attorneys. The fallout came hard and fast. The HOA's law firm, once they reviewed the defunct ordinance issue, the meeting audio, my letters, the deputy's presence, the video of the Bobcat cutting certified soil, and the USDA involvement, shifted tone with almost comedic speed. Suddenly, they were eager to discuss de-escalation. Suddenly, there had perhaps been miscommunication. Suddenly, board exposure was a concern. Arthur was having none of it. Meanwhile, the residents of Willow Creek, many of whom had long swallowed Karen's petty cruelty because fighting alone is exhausting, found themselves staring down the possibility that their dues were about to fund a spectacularly stupid legal disaster. Fear turned into anger. Anger turned into organization. Arthur helped a group of residents draft a petition for an emergency HOA meeting. They got more than enough signatures in a single afternoon. People were done. Not just with the blueberry field, but with everything that had led to it. The fines, the threats, the selective enforcement, the cultivated atmosphere of humiliation. Thursday night, the clubhouse filled beyond capacity. This time I was not signed in quietly as a guest. I was invited to speak. The room was packed shoulder to shoulder. Residents lined the walls and spilled out into the hall. Karen sat at the front table with the rest of the board, but the balance of power had shifted so completely she looked like a woman who had arrived at the wrong funeral. Mrs. Gable, temporarily chairing the meeting under the petition rules, called it to order. Then the floor opened, and that's when the dam broke. One by one, residents stood. Mrs. Gable spoke first. She talked about being fined for wind chimes after her husband died and how the house had sounded too empty without them. The room went still at that. Then the young couple described being forced to tear out the vegetable patch they had planted with their children during the pandemic. Mark described fines over the satellite dish he needed because his mother, who lived with him, relied on a foreign language channel that wasn't available any other way. Arthur's father stood and held up the shutter notice. Another woman spoke about being threatened with a lien over weeds that turned out to be native pollinator plants. A man in the back said Karen had publicly shamed his daughter for chalk drawings on the sidewalk because they were visually disorderly. What struck me wasn't just the content, it was the tone. Nobody was theatrical. Nobody was performing outrage for sport. They sounded tired, embarrassed, relieved. The way people sound when they finally realize other people have been having the same nightmare in private. By the time Mrs. Gable called my name, the room had changed. I walked to the podium with no notes. I told them who I was, that my grandfather planted those bushes after coming home from war with more calluses than money, that my father kept the farm alive when smaller farmers were getting swallowed whole, that my wife had believed enough in the future of that land to spend her last good years helping me build it into something sustainable and clean and worth handing down, even if there was nobody left in my family to hand it to. I explained what organic certification actually meant, not as a marketing sticker, but as a binding set of obligations to the land, to customers, and to the federal government. I explained how one arrogant act on a Monday morning could jeopardize years of work, not because federal agencies are sentimental, but because standards mean nothing if anybody with a bulldozer and a committee can ignore them. Then I looked at Karen. This was never about parking, I said. The room stayed quiet. It was about power. It was about whether somebody with a binder, a board title, and enough confidence could treat private property, public truth, and other people's livelihoods like pieces on a game board. She didn't just trespass on my farm. She told all of you that she could do it, and she expected you to clap. Nobody moved. When people get a little bit of power, I said, they show you who they are. You've seen enough. The vote that followed was not close. Karen was removed as president. 2 board members resigned on the spot before formal removal could reach them. The remaining members were either voted out or stripped of authority. Mrs. Gable was appointed interim president by emergency motion until a proper election could be held. Karen didn't make a speech. She gathered her purse, her papers, and what remained of her composure. Then she walked out under a silence colder than any shouting could have been. Afterward, people lined up to apologize to me, which I did not need and did not particularly enjoy, but I understood why they did it. They weren't only apologizing for the field. They were apologizing for what happens in communities when everybody privately dislikes a thing and nobody believes they can stop it. The legal part moved faster once Karen was gone. The new interim board, guided heavily by Arthur and watched carefully by their suddenly very interested residents, entered settlement talks within days. They agreed to pay for the remediation required to restore the damaged section of the field. They covered my legal expenses. They compensated for crop loss risk and disruption. The USDA, after its own review, imposed significant penalties, though David later told me the agency took the new board's cooperation into account when structuring the outcome. Karen herself faced separate personal exposure because Arthur had been smart enough to name not just the association but responsible individuals in the initial suit where appropriate. It turned out being HOA president was much less glamorous once your own attorney started explaining indemnity limits to you in a conference room. She listed her house within 6 weeks, sold it at a loss before the first leaves turned, moved away before Halloween. I never saw her again. The damaged corner of the field took time. That was the part nobody celebrates on social media. The boring, expensive, patient work after the dramatic victory. Soil testing. Documentation. Topsoil sourcing that met certification requirements. Compost approvals. Cover crop reestablishment. Revised field maps. Additional inspections. More forms. Always more forms. There were days I was angrier during remediation than I had been during the confrontation itself. Because a clean fight is one thing, repair is another. Repair asks you to keep showing up long after the adrenaline is burned off and the other person is gone. But something else happened too. The new board behaved like adults. Mrs. Gable kept her word. She answered calls. She sent things in writing. She treated the farm as a neighboring property rather than an obstacle. When residents asked if there was any way to rebuild good relations with me, I told her there was only one kind of gesture that mattered. Respect the line. Mean it. They did. Then one Saturday in early fall, Mrs. Gable called and asked if there was any use for volunteer help spreading mulch and laying weed barrier along the non-certified edge near the road. My first instinct was to say no. Pride can make a man lonely. But then I thought about the little girl I had seen at the emergency meeting leaning against her mother's side while adults talked about power and humiliation and gravel and legal fees. I thought about what kind of place a neighborhood becomes if the story ends only with exile and invoices. So I said yes. About 24 people came. Mark showed up in gloves he clearly bought that morning. The young couple with the vegetable garden came, and so did Arthur's parents. A teenage boy hauled mulch like he was trying to work off a bad report card. Somebody brought a cooler of bottled water and a box of bakery cookies from the grocery store. Mrs. Gable arrived with sunscreen in her purse and enough bossiness to organize 3 generations. Nobody made a speech. That was what I appreciated most. They worked. They asked where things should go. They listened when I answered. The children were told to stay out of the rows unless invited. They did better than I expected. By the end of the day, the roadside edge looked cleaner than it had in years. Afterward, I stood by the wash station and watched Willow Creek residents brush dirt off their knees and talk to one another in the kind of easy, low-key way that makes a place feel less manufactured. Arthur came over carrying 2 water bottles. "You know," he said, handing me one, "this is the part most people never get." "What part?" "The fact that you didn't just win. You changed the culture next door." I looked out over the field. The bushes were starting to turn. Some leaves had gone red at the edges. "I didn't change it," I said. "Karen did. She just finally went too far in public." Arthur smiled. "That too." By the following summer, the scar in the field had healed enough that only I could still see where it had started. The berries were excellent that year. Maybe not because of the fight, probably because we had good rain, a mild spring, and enough cool nights to sweeten the fruit. But I'll tell you this, it is possible for relief to improve the taste of food. It is possible for peace to register on the tongue. One Friday evening in July, about a year after the whole mess began, I carried a hand-painted sign down to the end of the driveway. I had made it myself in the shop, white background, blue letters, nothing fancy. Miller Family Farm. USDA organic blueberries. You pick Saturdays. Neighbors, welcome. I planted the sign by the mailbox and stepped back. For a second, I thought of Karen and almost laughed at the phrase neighbors welcome. She would have hated it. Not because she disliked neighbors, because she disliked anything she couldn't control. That first Saturday, cars started pulling in around 8. Not in a flood, just a steady line. Minivans, pickup trucks, sedans with booster seats in the back, grandparents with grandchildren, a church couple I knew from town, Mrs. Gable in a visor wide enough to shade a porch, Arthur with his niece riding on his shoulders and his mother carrying a pie plate under foil because of course she did. Mark came too, along with his mother, who turned out to be an excellent berry picker and a ruthless judge of ripeness. Children ran down the rows with their buckets. Parents followed with the nervous, repetitive warnings parents always issue around anything remotely agricultural. Don't pull the branch. Only the dark ones. Watch your step. Don't eat too many before we weigh them. There is a particular sound ripe blueberries make when they hit the bottom of a metal pail. A soft, dry little thok. Once you've heard a field full of that sound, mixed with children laughing and adults talking low in the heat, it is hard to think of land as wasted if it is not paved. Around 11, I saw a young father from Willow Creek kneel beside his daughter at the row nearest the old irrigation valve box. He pointed under a leaf cluster and showed her how to spot the berries that had gone fully dusky, nearly black-blue with that pale powdery bloom still on them. "Those are the good ones," he told her. "Leave the pinkish ones." She looked up at him, solemn and intent, then dropped 2 perfect berries into her bucket like she was handling treasure. I stood there a long moment watching them. That was the thing Karen never understood. Community was never going to be built by flattening the field. It was built there by letting the field remain itself. People who had spent months glaring at HOA emails now stood shoulder to shoulder comparing muffin recipes. Children from houses with identical garage doors came home with purple-stained fingers and leaves in their hair. Folks who had once only known my farm as that land next to the subdivision now knew the difference between a ripe berry and an almost ripe berry, knew where the shade hit first in the morning, knew the smell of crushed clover under boots, knew that the man in the old farmhouse was not a stubborn obstacle to convenience, but somebody who had been guarding something worth keeping. By noon, the checkout table by the barn was crowded. I weighed buckets, made change, and sent more than one family home with extra because their kid had worked surprisingly hard, or because the grandmother reminded me of somebody I used to know. Mrs. Gable tried to pay full price, and I told her absolutely not, after which she slipped cash under the pie plate when she thought I wasn't looking. Arthur caught me seeing it. "She cheats honorably," he said. "She does," I agreed. Later that afternoon, after the last car pulled out and the cicadas rose up again in the trees, I walked back down the rows alone. The field was quiet except for bees and the faint click of cooling metal from a wagon left near the shed. The heat had settled. The bushes held the smell of fruit and leaf and sun. Beyond the fence line, the houses of Willow Creek stood neat and still, their rooftops catching late light. I stopped at the repaired corner. A stranger would never have known where the bobcat cut had started. The clover had come back. The soil tests were good. Certification held. The berries there were as healthy as anywhere else. I stood with my hands on my hips and looked out across the land my grandfather bought, my father saved, my wife believed in, and one foolish woman nearly turned into parking for a gala. I did not feel triumphant. That isn't really the right word for these things. What I felt was steadier than triumph. I felt satisfied. Satisfied that paper still matters when you keep it right. Satisfied that boundaries are not cruelty. Satisfied that patience, used properly, can be more destructive to arrogance than rage ever is. Satisfied that people who have been quietly pushed around for too long will, under the right pressure, rediscover their backbone all at once. Mostly, though, I felt grateful. Grateful that the line held. Grateful that my grandfather's bushes were still in the ground instead of under gravel and oil drips. Grateful that the sweetest thing to come out of that whole mess wasn't revenge or money or public humiliation, but a better kind of peace than the one I had before. Because before Karen, I had privacy. After Karen, I had neighbors. And that year, standing in the warm hush of the field while evening settled over the rows, I picked one last berry from the branch nearest my shoulder and dropped it into my mouth. It was the sweetest blueberry I had ever tasted. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story had you shaking your head, leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in his place. And if you enjoy powerful, heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.